This is Room in the Trees, a podcast about storytelling, authenticity, crawling into holes.
And
berries.
And the poison in them.
The poison in the berries.
The show is hosted by Trent Reynolds and myself, Sabrina Ward-Harrison. Show notes, including links and other information, can be found at roominthetrees.com. You can follow us on Instagram. Trent is at Trent Reynolds Art, and I am at Sabrina Ward-Harrison on Instagram.
We got some feedback from the last episode on composition, and we also had some interest in the idea of doing critiques, online critiques.
Cool.
Yes. So we will continue to pursue that idea. Maybe.
Can you share the feedback?
Tammy H. said, I really love this episode. The talk of composition is interesting for sure. To watch for how several paintings can stay the same even with different subject matter is a good awareness. I like the rapport and respect between you two. I would love to have my art critiqued. I'm always looking for new insights from fresh eyes. Thank you. Thank you, Tammy.
Tammy's in Untether. Took Untether.
Oh, was she?
Yep. She's a great participant.
And then we have another message from Susie L. She said, loved this episode. I found the whole conversation surrounding composition interesting. I'd never thought of the edge of whatever surface I'm working on as being a factor.
Cool. Oh, she's ready for a book.
She's ready. Is that what you talk about? Oh, making a book.
Yeah. And that side note about that, people have been asking about when they can find out more information about Liberate, the book course. And so all of that comes out the last week of April, first week of May. So the registration and information will all kind of happen in one gust of excitement around the very end of April. And doors for registration will open for May 1st. So people can be getting all that information is going to come out. There's going to be some videos that will be launching at the very end of the month. So stay tuned for all of that. And be sure you're on my mailing list. You can go to sabrinawardharrison.info if you aren't on it and get yourself on the wait list by just putting your name in the window that comes up when you go to the site.
Awesome.
And we have our video coming out next week.
Oh, Decisive Action.
Cannot wait for your feedback, everyone's feedback about that. And we want to make more of them and do some classes.
You can see a trailer on the website, roominthetrees.com.
It is dynamite to be back in California.
Dynamite,
man. It is so good to be back here in the Bay Area. Wow. It's been so many years. What was I thinking? I just came back from taking an explore. I went back to my old art school, which I haven't been back to, and just roamed around. And the school's expanded. It's California College of the Arts, and it used to be called CCAC. Now it's CCA. And we were there. I was there the first year that the San Francisco campus opened, so it was much smaller and expanded out to a big, big, beautiful, modern campus. But I was roaming the old part of the building that I remember coming in for my critiques, and I went into the bathroom I used to hide in.
You used to hide in?
Yeah, I used to hide in it occasionally, just to try to ground myself and get, centered before a critique.
Right.
Yeah, so it's really great to be back and taking it all in.
Does it bring back not just memories, but just the feelings of what you did there and the experiences that just the energy of that time?
And what's in full circle is that this morning I had a conversation with Sam Lamott on his podcast, Hello Human, and he was asking a listener question, which was about, I wish I could remember her name, but she was asking about a certain page that said, with my bruised knee, messy hair, and chapped lips, I'm splendidly imperfect. Another bath it will be. And the question was, do you remember writing that? And it was actually, I found that journal page recently where I'd written in my journal that, and I actually remember when I was telling him, I was saying, I remember that feeling. It was during that being in art school and feeling like, well, feeling that way and admitting it. I hadn't really ever written about those, like, well, I'll just admit that I'm just kind of this way right now. And
Mm.
I don't know if that makes sense, but to be then back on that land that I'm like, yep, this is where I was here with my chapped lips, bruised knees, and messy hair, just making it through. So, and also just the learning environment of school. I'm sure you know, for you with the Art Institute, just walking around and seeing critiques going on and just be like, man, I want to be in there.
Yeah, it's hard not to be. So when we were there in Chicago
Yeah.
in October, we went and walked through
Yeah.
some of the buildings that Laura and I had gone to at the Art Institute, and yeah, it's hard not to be jealous. Like just because it's expanded as well, and there's like
Right.
a new Fab Lab, and
Right.
there's like the studios are amazing, and
Right.
everything is in like new cafeteria, and I don't know. It's just like you guys don't understand
I
what
know.
you've got. This is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's kind of worn in a bit more. Like it just feels like it's all cool and there's just more stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's like kind of weathered in a cool way. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. That's exciting.
It was great. It was really cool to be back. And I'm staying at my friend Blythe's house, who I remember it's funny not seeing people for so long and how you can kind of pick up right where you left off, and we're sort of talking in the funny voice we used to talk in, like, hello, hey little people. You just and you had that recently with Emily Roberts, didn't you? You saw an old friend from high school.
Yes, yeah, we had a really really nice time. We took I went with her for a drive to Santa Barbara area, and we stopped and ate at this burger joint that was right on the ocean. It was beautiful. But yeah, it's like there's nothing like sitting down with somebody that you have that deep history with, you know, and you've seen them go through their life and seen their path, and
just people with inside jokes from a long time ago. You know, you and Emily had a lot of laughs.
Yeah, I met Emily in art class as well. I met you in art class. I met Emily in 7th grade, Mrs. Sanderson's class.
Okay.
Do you remember Mrs. Sanderson?
Yeah, I think that's where I met. I think I met your brother there.
Oh.
With a little crush on your brother back in the old 6th, 7th grade. Mrs. Sanderson's art class.
Anyway, yeah, it was wonderful to see her. She lives up in La Cañada, which is not that far away, but still, you know, just life is busy, and it's hard to make time to, just to hang out for a bit. And it is gorgeous right now in California.
Yeah.
It is perfect. Like it's not too hot. There's a nice cool breeze, and it's just perfect temperature. Everything. It's just the sun is shining. The plants are green. The hills are still like bright green from all the rain that we got, and I don't know. There's something just so glorious about this past week.
Yeah,
it's just been really beautiful. We just had, I think, four new people join the studio space.
Oh,
and
cool.
Yesterday I worked with 2 ceramicists who have joined the studio space to build out a table and some racks for ceramics in that front room. I don't know if you remember that, where the kiln is. So now that space is looking more like legit, like well utilized, and I don't know. You know this about me. Like I very much enjoy things looking purpose built and everything kind of, well organized. So I'm excited about that, and the people that are coming in are just really solid, great people. I'm excited for them to be there, and we were all over there today, and everybody's working, and somebody ordered in a pie. Trevor did, actually. He said he started a new tradition, Pie Fridays, and
that's
I guess there's
cool.
There's a pie shop called Pie Hole, and they deliver. So he had a pie delivered.
What kind?
I don't even know. It was purple. It was purple with pistachios on top. Really tasty. He told me it was not a usual, like a normal flavor. You know, it was. I can't even hazard a guess. It was a strange,
like
strange
Loganberry or something.
Who eats loganberry?
I don't know.
Would you know where where does loganberry come from?
I'll investigate. Aren't they small, round little berries? I wonder where they get the name. I've got to find that out.
But it is one of those berries that every once in a while, like you'll run across, some product that has loganberry in it, and you're like, what?
I feel like it's like a sort of tart, but then
currant.
Really sweet. Yeah, currant. Currant's good.
You've got currant's good.
Logan. Wonder where the name came from. Who's Logan? Remember Mr. Logan?
Yeah, Logan was down by the river, found a berry. Let's call it loganberry.
Okay, the loganberry is a hybrid of blackberry and raspberry. Hey.
A hybrid.
The plant and the fruit resemble the blackberry more than the raspberry, but the fruit color is a dark red rather than black as blackberries.
Who knew berries were so, intermixable?
Yeah, the boysenberry.
Maybe they aren't.
It's a cross among the European raspberry and the European blackberry. The American dewberry and loganberry. So
wait, they're all mixtures of raspberry and blackberry?
It's the boysenberry is a cross among 4 fruits.
Four.
The European raspberry, European blackberry, the dewberry, and the loganberry.
Oh, wow.
Yes, it was the Knott's Berry Farm. That is right. Correct. Always a little bit of education thrown into the mix here with their program.
That's right.
Let's just finalize with what flavor of berry would be your favorite.
I have to admit, I am when it comes to jam.
Yeah.
Or I really do like the boysenberry. I'll go to the store just for boysenberry, Knott's boysenberry.
Really?
I don't know if it's jelly or jam. I'm not even sure if I really understand that. Maybe this is embarrassing to admit. I don't know if I know the difference between jelly and jam.
Yeah, so jam has...
Yeah.
I knew that came out like that.
Just go ahead. I'm sorry. You're gonna say.
I felt really good that I knew the answer to that. Really good about it. So jam has the seeds in it, and jelly doesn't have the seeds in it.
Oh, yeah. I did not.
And I'm sure there's a lot more to it than that. Like the jelly, the consistency would be different, but jam is you got the little bits in it. So you prefer jelly, do you?
No, I like jam better. I like the bits.
Yeah.
Like the seeds.
I would say I'm a raspberry. Yep. My grandmother used to make fresh raspberry jam, and I love raspberry jam.
Yeah, I mean, they're all so good.
Yeah.
If you know of anybody that has developed their own berry, I'd be curious to hear about that. Tell us about your berries.
What berry is native to Wisconsin?
There must be. States have flowers. Do states have berries?
Do states have berries? Okay, what is the state? What is the state berry?
California must be boysenberry. I can't imagine there's a more famous California native berry. Apparently there are no California state berries. Governor Gavin Newsom declared avocados as the state fruit, almonds as the state nut, and artichokes as the state vegetable, and rice as the state grain. There are no state berries.
The Wisconsin's state fruit is the cranberry. So California is the avocado and Wisconsin's the cranberry.
Well, there you go. New Jersey. Oh, I've got there's a whole list on here.
What is what? What's
Alaska.
The banana?
Who's the banana? I don't know if anybody's got the banana. Okay, maybe I'm misunderstanding this list, but North Carolina, strawberry.
Okay.
New Jersey, blueberry. Kentucky is a glass of milk.
Shut up.
I don't understand this list. Georgia, unsurprisingly, is a peach. Florida, key lime pie. California is avocado, and Alaska is salmon. So I guess those are just maybe state favorites or identifying fruits.
So who are we? Tell us a little bit about who our guest is this week.
This week we invited a studio mate of mine on, and his name is Trevor Albert. Trevor is a movie producer who also paints, and really interesting background. And he runs a comedy film school associated with Second City in Chicago, um, and just has a very unique perspective on art making because of a very different background. So in this conversation, we talk about his experiences in making movies, his history, and how he came up through the ranks. We talk about his about film and his film school and Harold Ramis, and he was the gopher in Caddyshack. No big deal. And here is our conversation with Trevor Albert.
Some podcasts are feel like homework to listen to.
Yeah.
Some educational ones that I listen to, and some are feel like people talking, but I really don't want to spend any time with them. And you guys are somewhere in between. I mean, I want to spend time with you guys, and they're sort of interesting. And the other thing is, I know Trent from hanging out with him in the studio, and those hangouts are fleeting because he's rarely here for very long. So I feel like I know him much better listening to the podcast than I do from spending time with him here. So part of it is like me knowing somebody and then getting to know a lot more about them by listening to them, talk extemporaneously.
And we've talked about that before. Just coming to the studio serves a very specific purpose in my day-to-day, in my life. And it's not, it's usually to unplug and to unwind. So when I'm here, it's not necessarily in the same mode as being, in a conversation on a podcast.
Right.
So.
Where's the podcast fit into all that? I thought you meant the podcast as your chance to unwind.
It is in a way. I guess maybe the difference is between unwinding and unplugging.
Yeah.
So coming to the studio is a chance for me to get my hands dirty and to just to focus on making. Yeah. It is much more kind of internal for me than. Whereas like when I'm at work or even on the podcast, it's all about engaging and interacting.
Mm-hmm.
So just different roles, I guess.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'm a fan.
Do you have a website, Trevor, that I can look at while we're talking?
Yeah, you can go to Trevor Albert. Just type in trevoralbert.com. I think will take you probably to me or a football player's website.
There's a baseball player named Trent Reynolds.
Is there?
So yeah.
Named
Trent.
Is there?
Yeah.
I thought we're talking about me. Now we're talking about you.
I'm just saying. I was trying to relate to you. I'm trying to create common ground here.
There's a sports person named after all of us.
There's some random girl in England named Sabrina Harrison.
Oh, wow.
Does she play a sport or she's
some person?
I think a very good cricket player, I believe.
So Trevor Albert, very well known, as it turns out, for his starring role as Punxsutawney Phil, the puppeteer. And I thought you were, am I going to get that wrong?
No, but you're so close.
This is so embarrassing. I thought for sure I was going to get this right.
No, a gopher who has no name in a different movie, Caddyshack.
I thought you were Punxsutawney Phil in Groundhog's Day.
No.
Oh, man.
Mm-hmm. Sorry.
You ruined my whole intro.
Oh, wow. Well, maybe it's gonna help your whole intro.
Yeah, I think.
Have we started yet?
This is embarrassing. Yeah.
Wow.
We're starting. Well, now
we started half an hour ago.
We're gonna have to cut this part out because I got this horribly wrong.
This may be the best part. This is the way people actually remember stuff.
Exactly.
It's the mistakes. Okay, so Trevor Albert.
Wow, you got my name right.
Well, that's a start. I feel pretty good about that. Well known for his role as the gopher in Caddyshack.
Right.
Which is a favorite movie of anybody born in, or, I guess conscious in that time.
Yeah.
Okay, so now that I've bungled your introduction, why don't you
You want to start again?
Well, can you tell me how you'd introduce yourself?
Oh, how I would introduce myself?
Yeah.
Hi, my name's Trevor Albert. Nice to meet you.
But you are famous.
Well,
in
I don't know.
spheres.
Famous? No, I was a
celebrity.
I was a production assistant on my first movie that I ever worked on, and the lowest person on the movie. And there was a point in that movie, Caddyshack, where they were trying to figure out how they were going to get the puppet to appear out of from the green on the golf course. And some stuff on movies is sort of fly by the seat of your pants. You sort of find solutions during the time you're shooting, and this was one of the things they hadn't really quite figured out. And so the prop people on the movie started digging a huge hole in which they were going to have, the puppet was going to appear out of behind the green. Mm-hmm. But the hole got so deep that nobody was willing to go in the hole to hold the puppet. And for various reasons. And eventually I saw everyone pointing at me. And the next thing I know, I was getting, the puppet was put on the end of my hand and I was getting pushed into the hole.
Awesome.
And so fame was really thrust upon me. I did not go looking for it.
Right. Did you get a credit for that?
I did not get a credit for it.
They just put you in that hole, made you endure that.
Yeah.
For no reward at all.
No, I don't think anyone knew that anyone would be speaking about that puppet ever.
That's so
let alone funny. 40 years later. The assistant to the director left after about a week of pre-production. And again, everyone looked around to see who could be the assistant, and they pointed at me, and I became the assistant to Harold, and the director was Harold Ramis.
And that is where your relationship with Harold Ramis began.
It is.
For those that aren't familiar with who he is, he was a Ghostbuster. He was one of the original, the nerdy one.
He was he wrote Ghostbusters and then was one of the actors in Ghostbusters.
Right.
And he wrote a bunch of movies before he wrote Caddyshack and directed. He wrote a movie called Animal House, and then something called Meatballs and Stripes and
Legendary.
And many other.
Yeah, those movies came after Caddyshack.
Yes.
And you were involved in all of those.
I was not involved. I was only involved in the movies that he directed.
I see. So he wrote some that he didn't necessarily.
Yeah.
You'll have to excuse me for not having a very deep knowledge of how movies or the movie industry works. But
I don't have a very deep knowledge of it either. So,
but you have.
Excuse me.
You have. We could go to IMDb, which I should have done before this, and you have been involved in many movies beyond that, and that was only the beginning of your career in movies, right?
It was, yeah. Although I worked with Harold for almost 22 years. I worked as an assistant on that movie, and then I worked up my way up the old-fashioned way in Hollywood. So I became the production associate, and then associate producer, and then producer, and then we were producing partners for, like I say, probably 15 of those or 18 of those 22 years.
And the majority of the movies that you've been involved in were in partnership with Harold? I
would say maybe 2/3 of them, and then I went on to do my own stuff. But it was a long, very exciting, collaborative journey with him.
And you're currently working, helping to lead a school in collaboration with Second City in Chicago.
I am. So Harold passed away way too early, about 6 or 7 years ago, and his wife was asked by Second City about a year after he died if she would let them use his name because they wanted to start a little film school, and she was not sure if that was sort of appropriate use of his name. She wanted to make sure she was protecting his legacy, so she called me and said, would I come to Chicago and meet with the Second City people and just hear what they were planning on doing. And I knew a little bit about film schools, or I should say art schools, because my daughter at that time was interviewing, going around looking at art schools around the country. So I went to Chicago and they sort of pitched this idea of a film school, a 1-year sort of conservatory. And I was fascinated by it and sort of liked the idea. And they sort of asked me for my thoughts on what, in a perfect world, I thought a 1-year film school focused on comedy studies would look like, and shared my thoughts, and then left. And then a couple of days later, they called and said, would I be interested in consulting? And that consultancy led to me going back and forth to Chicago over the next 6 months. And then eventually they said, would I like to help run the school? And so because by then I was so invested in it, and I love the idea of having a school that was just focused on comedy filmmakers, which is kind of a rarity. Doesn't exist in the country, or the world, as far as I know.
I was interested to hear about like what your idea was for 1 year, like what that looked like.
What I felt like, having visited film schools with my daughter and even gone and shown movies at film schools around the country in my career, was, first of all, comedies were in short supply. Most film schools think of comedy as sort of they tack it on somewhere, towards the end of their presentation of film students. They're not really taken seriously in film school, or even in most circles. So I love the idea that we would focus on that. And when I started working for Herald, I was 22 years old, and although I liked comedy and I liked to laugh and make people laugh, I didn't really have a great sort of I didn't have a great knowledge of the history of comedic film or TV or literature. And in the course of my working with Harold that first year or two, he would occasionally come up to me and say, have you seen a movie called Sullivan's Travels by Preston Sturges? I'm like, no. He said, watch that movie and then, we'll talk. And then a couple of weeks later, he'd say, have you seen Marx Brothers movies? And no. And so my relationship with him, certainly in the early years, was, him exposing me to all this great comedic literature and movies and TV. And so my joke is I was the first graduate of the Harold Ramis Film School. So when I was thinking of doing this school in Chicago, I had that sort of memory of him sort of mentoring me and exposing me to all these wonderful things. And I thought, well, boy, it would be great if young people are interested in comedy, being comedy filmmakers, storytellers more specifically, could get that same immersion in those things. And so I said, I think if we're going to do it, it should be focused on storytelling, because that's what Harold was. He was really a storyteller more than anything else. He wasn't that interested in where the camera went or, how things looked. Eventually got more interested, but he was really interested in telling stories and in a comedic way that had, heart and humanity. So I wanted to infuse all those things that he had sort of passed on to me into the school. And fortunately, we've had the ability to do that. So it's a 1-year conservatory, 12 months, pretty intense. And the students they take a class in the history of comedic literature from, Shakespeare and Aristophanes to, David Sedaris, and, TV from, Show of Shows all the way to, Friends, and right up to, Insecure, whatever's on now. And same with movies, from Chaplin movies and Keaton all the way up to, Adam McKay and so it's pretty immersive.
As they study those, those precedents, are you talking about, are there like, is there an aesthetic, or is there like a practical approach to making comedic film that's different in how you would approach other subject matter? Or is it
not really?
It's just an awareness kind of the conventions or the history that helps you to tell your own stories?
Yeah, I think like most art forms, understanding what came before you sort of, somehow gets in your DNA and affects how you, create art. And I would consider comedy as, part of that. I think foundationally a good comedy has to follow the same dramatic structure of a conventional movie, beginning, middle, and end, and, interesting, compelling characters. And the comedy stuff is sort of, the sort of secret sauce that, if you're gifted enough as a writer and then a director and a performer to be able to pull that off, that sort of, adds to that foundational thing, that, again, dramatic movies have to have. Right. So there's no formula really. And I'd like to say, if you come to the Harold Ramis Film School, at Second City, you'll learn that formula. It really is just a combination of historical understanding, immersing yourself in everything that's come before, and the practice of actually doing it and being mentored by people who've done it.
Right. So you yourself are a mentor to students there.
Oh yeah.
And I imagine there's a whole system of mentorship. Is that Second City is also involved in that, actors or?
So the students study the historical, sort of theoretical stuff, and they also study screenwriting, and they also study filmmaking. So they get to do sort of a broad variety of things. Foundationally, everything is about storytelling. In other words, that's the thing we really emphasize. The fancy cameras and all that stuff is still not something that I think is that important. But at the end of the year, they all make short films, and some of them are exceptional. And when they're making their short films, they have access to the people under that Second City roof, which is where our school is in Chicago, which is the same stage that Steve Carell and Tina Fey, and going all the way back to Belushi and Bill Murray. That's the place they all started. So it's also kind of an exciting, interesting thing to be at a school where the classroom is 100 feet away from the main stage at Second City, where the next generation of performers are doing their 7 nights a week. They're entertaining people in Chicago. So it's like a very dynamic atmosphere.
And just proximity, it seems like the students in the film school would just be going and watching the performers and getting a lot just from having that so accessible.
Yeah, that is true. They do. They obviously they can go to those shows and watch that stuff. It's different because have you ever been to? Did you go to Second City when you were?
No, I'm ashamed to say, because I was there for 3 years and I never did go to Second City.
Is it too late?
Never too late.
It's never too late. Anyway, it's that is performative sort of not sort of, it is improvisational comedy.
Right.
And what we do at the film school is different in that it's more traditional sort of narrative storytelling. They're writing pilots and TV pilots and feature films.
Right.
So it's a different form of comedy, but it still is obviously comedy.
Right. Mm-hmm. But it seems to me like in comedy, especially like improv, you want that feeling of like unforced or natural interaction or dialogue or whatever like that. And in film, you have to create that feel without the improv, right? You got to create the illusion of that freeness or looseness without the structure of improvisation.
Yes, that is true. But have either one of you ever been to an improv show?
Yeah.
Right. So the experience is moments of hilarity and moments of cringeworthy, oh my God, they missed it, or they're not getting it, right? The reason to have a screenwriter is to avoid those moments of cringeworthy, oh wow, they went the wrong direction.
Right.
It's kind of exciting, it's like a tightrope act, and really good improvisers are unbelievable.
Right.
But if it's not working, it's really painful.
But I think it's like going to a fight, or even going to like a live theatrical performance, that the stakes are higher because you know that there could be failure, right?
Totally. But going to a theater performance, well, the actors have no lines,
Right. Right. Yeah. The stakes are even higher.
Yeah.
But that's part of the enjoyment I've always found in improv is like you understand the difficulty of what you're trying to do, and it's just
the audience is in on it.
Yeah.
So certainly having those kind of people who are able to do that work on your short film for these film students is unbelievable.
Yeah,
because we encourage the students to have scripts, obviously, and for the actors to at least do a version of a scene with the scripted line, and then, which is what happened, with something that Harold encouraged in movies I've encouraged, is that do the line as it's written, and now try do your own version of it, make it broader, do it, sillier, it's like there's improvisational actors have the ability to come and bring additional stuff besides what's in the script.
Oh, and it's just seeing genius in genius happening. It's just, the speed at which the ideas come and are developed and, problem solving comedically is just
even in high school, I remember. Trent, do you remember the Comedy Sports with Mrs. Healy?
Yeah, I did that.
Wait, were you both in it?
No.
Don't you remember I did it a little bit.
I was in Comedy Sports.
Yeah.
When I was in high school.
You were the quarterback, I believe.
No, I was on the bench.
Wait, did you guys go to high school together?
We did.
Yeah, that's where we know each other.
What the heck?
We did.
Yeah,
we go way back.
We went.
Oh my gosh! Wait, where'd you guys go to high school?
La Cañada High School.
You both grew up in La Cañada?
Yeah.
Wait, weren't you the gopher in the? No,
yeah. Does this ring any bells?
Yeah.
The majority of my time, or the reason I met you is because we both occupy this space in the art studio,
right?
Which has nothing to do necessarily with your, the majority of your career. So I'm interested in hearing how you found your way to visual art and what effect that has, or what relationship that has to filmmaking, if anything.
Right.
It's just a side thing.
When I was probably maybe 6 or 7 years into trying to make it in the film business, I started, after I, did my time as an assistant, working my way up. Eventually, I was in a position of having to try and develop ideas for movies, whether they were my own ideas or books or scripts that I would find. And I would find ideas that I was very passionate about, and start rolling those ideas up the Hollywood Hill. And I very quickly learned how frustrating it is and how long it takes to get movies made. Mm-hmm. I mean, years and years and years, and many of them never get made. And so, probably after 7 or 8 years, or 6 or 7 years, I was so frustrated that I didn't have a creative outlet, that I just looked for something new. And I'd always been interested in visual arts, and I'd studied art in college a little bit, and I thought, all right, I'm going to just start doing something so that I don't have to ask permission to create something. Because to make a movie, you need permission. You need a studio or a financier to say yes, and then all those people to collaborate on it. And so I started painting, I don't know, 30 years ago, just in my basement, occasionally. And in periods where I felt like I was stuck creatively or frustrated, I would, always resort to just, painting as an outlet. And so I've been doing it, that sort of motivated it. And I would take classes mostly, just because I was very used to being in a environment where people were, this expression, parallel play. You never heard it? That's an expression I love. So my wife and I often do it. She's a graphic designer, and so we're at home and she's doing her graphic design and I'm drawing or something, and that's parallel play. We're not talking.
Oh yeah,
to
like
each
side
other.
by side
We're
time.
both doing our thing together.
I like that phrase.
Yeah, it's a lovely phrase. So I realized painting in my basement by myself was not enough for me. So I felt the need to want to be around other people. So I started taking classes, and that was another community of totally different people, from Hollywood, people, who, it was all about story and narrative and verbal and stuff, and sit in a room or stand in a room with a bunch of people painting silently, talking, whatever, but using a totally different part of your brain and exercising totally different creative muscles. And I just loved it. I loved I'm not going to call it distraction. It's just some other thing opened up in my brain that I felt was nourishing. And there have been years. So from the time I started painting, I then met my now wife, and we had 2 children, and life got in the way, and I stopped painting for years. And then every once in a while I would, dabble and stuff. But my youngest daughter left for college about 1.5 years ago. And I thought, all right, I want to spend more time doing this thing I love. And so I started taking more painting classes, and then found this space, and then found Trent, and here I am.
Yeah.
And then I found Sabrina. So now whenever I can, I paint.
So painting was kind of there's immediacy to that isn't present in the process of making movies. that ability to have an idea and then immediately act on that idea and see some kind of result, right? But do you find that process informs or changed your perception of movie making and the kind of creative outlet that is?
I don't know that it changed my perception of movie making, but I think when you say you have an idea and you can just do it, part of the beauty of, I'm an abstract painter, so part of the beauty of this is I don't have to have an idea, or at least it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to go through that sort of intellectual sort of filter, and meet the metrics of, does the story work? Is this, it's like, when you're working on a screenplay or developing a story, it's, complex set of, metrics that by now I probably are, it's sort of somehow in my DNA when something's working or not, but it's still like a, mental exercise. Left brain, right brain, I don't know. Is it the right brain that sort of the more analytic, and the
left brain analytic, I think right brain creative.
Right. So the left brain analytics are important in filmmaking, because it's what makes, movies are sort of a mathematical aspect of making movies. People think of it as, purely creative, or maybe they do, but it's not. There's a lot of things that you have to get right to make these things work, unless you're an experimental filmmaker, and that sort of, meets some different criteria. But painting, I could just turn off all those filters and just purely get into the flow. People artists talk about getting in the, the flow, state of flow, or whatever it is. You don't get into that when you're making movies. But
I think that's so interesting because Sabrina, a lot of art, you're in my conversation in terms of how we each approach art. It seems like one of the ways that you operate is, it feels like you have a freedom from this need to intellectually justify what you're doing. Whereas I feel like through going to art school, where you're constantly being asked to justify what, have some kind of, cultural context that you're trying to fit your artwork into, or some concept behind it. It's so concept heavy, right, that you almost can't start doing anything until you have some justification, which is something I feel like I've had to try to overcome. And part of why I think I've ended up in abstraction these past couple of years is I haven't had the time to try to intellectually justify anything. So the time I do have is just, I've got to do something, so it's on action first, and then, any kind of justification or trying to understand what it is has to happen. Anyway, I think it's interesting to hear you talk about, this being a relief almost from having to spend time intellectually justifying before you create. You just jump into the creation and, the thinking about it till later, if at all.
When I'm working on a piece and I start getting stuck, like we all do, and then the intellectual stuff starts to seep in, and what's this, and what does it mean, and why am I doing it, and how is somebody else going to perceive it, then the flow state is over, and you're back in sort of, the knots of figuring out why, and, justifying it all. But my happiest time is when I'm sure most artists, when they're in that sort of heightened state where, you're just moving forward without questioning. And that I never had making movies.
Right.
It's a different thing.
I grew up with a father who's a filmmaker, so watching the we think we got the deal, no, and then yes, and then and all the elements of it. So
exactly.
But then also when the film does happen and you get into that flow of it, of really creating, and that is so exciting. And there's a sort of level of improvisation that has to happen as well, as at least with directing that occurs. But I think that getting into the flow state, the euphoria that results from getting into that flow space that we all want to get into, and in our busy lives, how can we drop down into that place as quickly as possible, when our time is limited.
I was thinking of the analogy of the movie business, of trying to get a movie made, it would be like I need a canvas. Yes, I got it. Nope, I can't get the canvas. The canvas, I thought I had it, but I can't get it. It's not available. And then, it's like, okay, I got the canvas. I'm going to start painting. Oh, the paints are gone. I don't have paint yet. I need somebody else to say yes to get the paints. And it's endless, and then I have the paints, but I look over and the person who gave me the canvas has decided to take it back. It's like,
yeah.
And it's like that way the whole time. It doesn't end. It's that way right until, right till like, what kind of stuff did your father do? Was he a director?
Writer and director. Yeah.
Aha.
Trevor, before we wrap up, I'm wondering if you have any, as we talk about, I guess, authenticity or developing some kind of authentic storytelling or expression. You've been involved in a school that I'm sure is trying to teach that very thing. It's like an approach to storytelling that comes across as authentic. Do you have advice or things that you've seen or that people struggle with and instruction on how to, I don't know, pursue that?
I don't know. I mean, it's a hard one to sort of reduce down to a couple of lines. I think the best thing to do is come to the school for a year, and then you'll know everything you need to about. No, I'm kidding. Maybe I'm not kidding. I think the hard thing, first of all, being a good storyteller among friends and family is way different than being a good storyteller in, like you were saying, Sabrina, standing up on a stage or creating a film. That's a totally different thing. And I think the notion of authenticity is the thing that I have to say important enough for me to stand up straight and have people listen to it, And I think a lot of stories that get pitched from young students or even older students feel like they are something they've heard from they've gotten from another movie or another TV show. So even though I think it's important for them to know what came before, for all of us, to read great literature and watch great movies and TV, I think at the end of the day, what's your own story? What is the stuff that is meaningful to you?
Right.
And that's not the natural instinct, I think, for a lot of young filmmakers now. They're so immersed in the media culture that's everywhere that it's very hard for them to sit back and think, all right, what was that family vacation like just with our family in that cottage somewhere? They're extrapolating it and combining it with the last episode they saw of Black Mirror combined with the last superhero thing. And that tends to, get as far away from authenticity as you can imagine. So sort of trying to figure out what those things are that, are interesting. And the last thing that's, for me, which is important is, what's important as a society. There's a certain responsibility that we have as storytellers, certainly young filmmakers, and I tell them this all the time. You think you're just, a kid in Chicago making a movie, but you could ultimately one day become somebody who is, in fact, having a significant voice in the cultural dialogue through your movies. And what is your responsibility, your social responsibility?
Right.
And you can make a movie which is an irreverent movie about nothing, and that's fine, making people laugh. But also, is there something about the society, about people, the way people are treating each other right now, about the sort of country in the world that feels a little out of control, or more than a little out of control, that's worth commenting on?
Right.
And unfortunately, a lot of our students are paralyzed by what's going on in the country now. Even we're paralyzed and don't know what to make of it. And so their stuff is sort of dystopian or comedic without any sort of social, it doesn't feel like they have enough social awareness. So I'm a big believer right now in encouraging students who have any inclination in making work about, our culture, our society, what's going on, and trying to comment on it and, hopefully shift the oil tankers slightly from the direction that it's turning.
Well, fantastic. Appreciate your time. Sometime I want to
Keep up
get
the
you
good
and
work.
David on.
Oh my gosh.
Together that would be fantastic.
Excellent.
We've had David on the show before, but I think it'd be great to hear you guys talking.
I would love it. Sabrina, enjoy your travels. Nice
Thank
meeting
you very much. It was nice meeting you, Trevor, and I'll hopefully see you in the studio one day.
Definitely. I look forward to it.
All right.
All right. See you guys.
We'll see you.
Bye.
You're done. Thank you so much.
Not at all. So, checks in the mail. Or sesame cracker? Sesame staff?
Yes. I'm going to get you a sesame staff. That's one thing that I could.
You can do that? All right. Yeah. You've got me addicted.
Yeah. That's good to hear.
Thank you, Trevor, for spending some time. It was really, really, really great discussion, and always enjoy talking to you.
Thanks, Trevor, and we look forward to talking and laughing again next week.
Go out and find yourself some berries. Have a wonderful week, y'all.
Oh, that was funny. Yep, that was great.